now I'm going to discuss how we would look for a new law. In general, we look for a new law by the following process. First, we guess it. Then we well, don't laugh, that's really true. Then we compute the consequences of the guess to see what, if this is right, if this law that we guessed is right, we see what it would imply, and then we compare those computation results to nature, or we say compare to experiment or experience, compare it directly with observation to see if it works. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. In that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is, it doesn't make a difference how smart you are who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
Okay, today I'm going to be placing a levitating globe in the vacuum chamber and seeing if it can spin forever. You can see that there's nothing around it. It's completely levitated. So now let's see how long it takes in the vacuum chamber. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we got a pretty good vacuum in there now. Let's see how long it can spin like this. Okay, now we're at around a half a revolution per second. So it's still slowed down even in the vacuum chamber.
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
So one thing that was different from our floating Earth here in the vacuum chamber and the real Earth in the vacuum is that this doesn't have air around it. But the question then arises, how come the vacuum of space doesn't suck the air off of the Earth? And it's a valid question. If you think about it, there's an atmosphere around the Earth and then there's a complete vacuum outside of it. So why doesn't all of the air just rush off the Earth into the vacuum? And the answer to that is actually pretty simple. It's due to the gravity of the Earth that holds the air on. And it's easiest to understand this if you think of air as little tiny particles. And so all of these little molecules of oxygen and nitrogen in the air, they're all bumping around, hitting each other. This is my molecule of oxygen, we'll say. And eventually, they can migrate up to the top of the atmosphere. So let's say it gets all the way up to the top of the atmosphere, and it gets bumped by another oxygen molecule and it flies up. But in order for that molecule to leave the Earth, it has to be going faster than the escape velocity of Earth. So the escape velocity happens because as you get further and further away from the Earth, the gravitational pull on the ball gets weaker and weaker and weaker, so that it will always have enough speed so that it will never return back to Earth. And that's called the escape velocity. So if you could throw a ball at the escape velocity, it would leave the Earth never to come back again. So the reason why you've never seen somebody throw a ball off the Earth is because the escape velocity of Earth is 11 kilometers per second. So around 33 times the speed of sound. So the regular molecules that are in our atmosphere, like nitrogen, oxygen, argon, they don't have enough velocity to escape the gravity of the Earth. But hydrogen, for example, does have a high enough speed to escape the Earth. So whenever you release hydrogen gas into the atmosphere, eventually it will migrate out to the edges of the atmosphere and it'll get bumped and it'll just fly off into space. So all the hydrogen leaves the Earth. And for that matter, actually all the helium also leaves the Earth. When you fill a balloon with helium, eventually all that helium will leave Earth. So if the Earth were much smaller than it is, then it wouldn't be able to keep the atmosphere on it because the escape velocity would be much slower. And that's why the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, because it's much smaller. It has only 1/6 the gravity of the Earth, and so the escape velocity is much slower, lower than the speed of the oxygen or the nitrogen atoms, so they can easily escape from the moon. So space is almost a perfect vacuum, and the Earth is going to be spinning for a very, very long time, but eventually it will slow down. So when the moon rotates around the Earth, it pulls on the Earth a little bit unevenly, and that's what causes the tides on the Earth to form. And because of those tidal forces, it slows down the Earth's rotation just a little bit, and the moon gets a little bit further away from the Earth. So as the moon moves away and the Earth slowly slows down its spin, after a few 100 billion years, the length of the day of the Earth will be around 47 current days. And then the moon and the Earth will become tide locked. And what that means is that the face of the Earth and the face of the moon will always be facing each other. Right now, the moon is already tidal locked with the Earth. So that's why we always see the same face of the moon, because it's orbiting at the same rate that it's rotating, so that it always faces the Earth. But way before the Earth and the moon become tide locked like that, the sun is eventually going to start burning out. And as it does, it's going to expand and eventually engulf the Earth in about 5 billion years from now. Hey everyone, thanks for watching another episode of the Action Lab. I hope you enjoyed it.
.mit.edu. All right. Let's try another pretty simple process. Let's just take a gas in some volume, V, and over here is going to be vacuum of equal volume, and we're going to remove the barrier. You know what's going to happen spontaneously, right? The gas is going to fill the available volume once it becomes available. Right?
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
One of these bulbs, some bromine, and in the other, I have a vacuum. And if I open the tap between these two, you will see spontaneously the bromine rush from one to the other. Now that is the simplest change we can have, perhaps, because all that happens is a change in entropy. In this case, the expansion into a vacuum, nothing else is involved. There's no energy change, there's no temperature change, there's no change except entropy. So,
Christoph, let me ask you, why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.